For this presentation, we will be speaking about COVID-19 and we'll be doing a retrospect analysis. It is interesting to speak about this topic because COVID seems to be in the past for a lot of people. They got over it with. Now we have Russia-Ukraine, we have politics, we have inflation, we have all these things that people are concentrating their attention on. Nothing wrong with that per se, but I'm saying it's interesting to do this analysis after such a change and such a shift in the American society. And why do I speak about changes and why do I speak about shifts? It's because our way of socializing, our way of speaking to each other, our everyday lives per se have changed due to what happened to this pandemic. Nowadays, when we are with people that we are just meeting, even though COVID-19 is theoretically in the past, we still, when we get to know somebody and do we shake hands? Do we not? Is this okay? Is this not? Even when I go to athletics or, for example, the gym, people that use the benches and they're not sweaty, they're just using it. But do they clean it up? Is it okay to just grab the dumbbells and not clean them up? Or how restrictive should we be? All those things that come to mind when we were actually in the pandemic. And of course, I will be speaking about the government and possibly exaggerated numbers and such. And by no means this is to minimize what happened. I understand that many people have died due to this illness. And as I stated before in my examples, the world is probably never going to be the same after this. And I understand that this is going to be a sensitive topic for people that have lost their loved ones, for example. But this is an analysis, and I will do my best to try to remove the emotions out of it so we can speak objectively. Now, to start off, we will be talking about the death toll. 765 million confirmed cases. Very large number, big chunk of the population of the planet. That is about 10% of the world population. And 7 million deaths. That is roughly less than 1% of the confirmed cases. According to the World Health Organization, which of course the source is below, the death toll of 765 million confirmed cases is a big part of the world population, as I stated earlier. That being said, this number is controversial in itself because it was put in question. Do these people are really dying of COVID? How many of those people had other serious underlying conditions where the most minor thing would have caused this? Let's just, for example, let's just say that there's a 96-year-old that has diabetes, cancer, all these terminal illnesses, gets COVID and dies. Well, most people would agree that yes, it is a tragedy, but it is not as serious as, let's say, Ebola. Healthy 18 years old just getting destroyed by the illness. There's a difference there. There's a difference. So we will need to dive into those 7 million deaths to go further in, do a research, and identify how many of those people had underlying conditions, how many of those people. And it turns out a big majority of those people were the elderly, the people with pre-conditions that made them more likely to suffer from not this illness but other illnesses as well. For those reasons, and the fact that doctors will use COVID-19 as pretty much any excuse at the confirmed type of death, we can see that naturally these numbers are inflated. Now, something else. If you die and you have COVID, then automatically COVID-19 is the cause of death. This is, of course, as I stated before, going to inflate the numbers and make it look like we have more cases than we actually have. Now, for the early stages of the virus, before we dive into it, we must accept that pandemics happen. They do. Viruses mutate. Yes, there is the theory it can be accidental. Maybe China did it on purpose. Maybe it was a leak. It was an accident. It was man-made. There's all those real possibilities. That being said, there's also legitimate outbreaks of the things that we cannot control. Ebola type. What I'm saying here is that I consider pandemics, when they're naturally made, of course, to be the forces of nature, like an earthquake, like a hurricane, so on and so forth. There's no one really to blame for a hurricane or an earthquake. It's just the force of nature acting upon us. Yes, pandemics suck, but they do happen. They're real. So, it is very important that we prepare for it, and when it gets here, accept it, and we must not overreact or freak out. Panicking is never the solution. As we dive into the topic, the media and the government post an end of the world scenario. Hey, you gotta do this, you gotta do that, emergency powers, etc., etc., etc. Really, really freaking out the population. And Ebola comparisons were made from politicians, and hey, back in the time the Ebola, we controlled it, despite it being two very different diseases. And of course, we have to give the government here some room to breathe, because we had a lack of understanding of the virus capabilities. So because of these, we didn't know for sure how to prepare ourselves. As time passed on, we learned more and more stuff. And over here I have the breakdown of the genetic material of the virus. As the picture states, the virus associated with the outbreak originated in Wuhan, China. It has been designated severe acute respiratory syndrome coronavirus 2. The disease caused by the virus is now officially called COVID-19. And of course, we have membrane protein, nuclear protein, enveloped small membrane protein, spike glycoprotein, all these things that form up the virus. This is a virus breakdown with the characteristics. As for the federal government's response, we faced serious lockdowns as the population. The justification, of course, is highly debatable, because we time and time again we happen to see government officials traveling and going on vacation to other states while restricting and limiting the movement of citizens. So we can clearly see that the government response was serious, strict, so on and so forth, but for the citizens, they didn't have those serious restrictions on themselves, of course. They were allowed to move freely, they were allowed to travel. And I know for a fact that the Chicago mayor, Lightfoot, put the lockdown down, of course, and she was seen cutting her hair, so on and so forth, outside. And of course, we couldn't do that as citizens. And the way she responded to the criticism was, I take my personal hygiene very seriously. So it just goes to show that politicians, both Republicans and Democrats, are not willing to do what they state for the citizens, which is naturally going to make them look bad. And of course, we have the 1 vaccine, 2 vaccine, triple vaccine, the booster shot, double boosters. Naturally puts in question the ability of the people making the vaccines on how effective it is. If you need 5 shots for an illness that has a less than 1% lethality rate. That's why the skepticals have a point there. As for the lessons learned, according to my assessment, the lethality was overreacted. Of course, the measures limited the economy and increased our national debt by trillions. So my biggest point here, and to summarize this specific point, I'm gonna say that we freaked out for something that wasn't that huge of a deal. Yes, wear mask, yes, hand sanitizer, yes, limit contact, etc., etc. But this is no reason to kill the livelihood of many people with their small businesses. Now that is something else, something different. And another lesson that we learned is that government will use these incidents to further advance their agenda. Never let a crisis go to waste. And of those COVID proposals, there's of course going to be a lot of things that are not related to COVID, but we want to do anyway, so push it in there. See what sticks. And governments are not going to let a crisis go to waste. And when the opposition says no to this, always say, oh, you want people to die because of COVID. That's just politics 101. Intro to politics. And amazes me how quickly people forget their constitutional rights in a state of quote-unquote emergency. So once the government says this is an emergency, the rights, the Constitution, that's all out of the window. It doesn't matter anymore. Because we are in a supposedly emergency. Which was very impressive to see. And of course, something we have never seen before. Here is a picture of New York City, Times Square, with literally 0 people outside, looking like a ghost town. And keep in mind, this is New York City we're talking about. Very impressive, hard to believe, but it just creates a visual image of how hardcore and how serious these policies were with this virus. As stated before, media influence is going to be a big part of it. The political left is going to use it to advance their agenda, saying we gotta pay people to stay in their house until the virus is over, income distribution, higher taxes. And the political right is going to use it to advance their agenda as well. Trying to reduce taxes for businesses to keep the workers around, for example. Stricter immigration laws. limiting the visas coming from that part of the world, from China. The political left calling this a racist move. So we can see the politics developing during this crisis. It's a virus. How can we make a virus political? Yes, we can. We can make anything political in this country. Politicians know how to use these to their advantage, and they will say and do things that is going to get them the most votes. Once they're elected in, they're going to ignore what they said, but a politician will say what he needs to say to get the votes. That is all. And as always, I have my sources here, both from the CDC and the World Health Organization on the cases and the tracker. I also have the Illinois Department of Public Health here, the New York Times, and I really like the U.S. Department of Defense coronavirus timeline. Shows how the virus developed over time. Very interesting to see. It was a really good read. And thank you for listening. This was my presentation.